Today I'm kitbashing a custom Space Marine chapter, and this is the chapter that came together through a community voting and polls here on YouTube, but mainly in the Discord. So I get to interpret all the answers you guys gave to all these questions and kitbash a little custom chapter. So let me give you a little bit of a background information while I'm getting some of these pieces ready here. Now this is a chapter raised by the Lords of Terra in response to Hive Fleet Leviathan arriving. Now obviously the Ordo Xenos was asleep at the wheel because they even considered discontinuing the Death Watch at some point. And how can a massive Leviathan Hive Fleet threaten the universe without anybody really knowing about it or seeing it happen? So High Lords of Terra, they came together and they said, let's create a new Space Marine chapter specifically to counter those vanguard units of the Leviathan. You know, the Lictors, the Leapers, the Von Ryan Leapers, the Death Leaper, all those things, but especially the Genestealer Cults. You know, a high fleet usually is preceded by a bunch of cultists rising up, patriarchs hiding in planets and so on, and then getting all the people mutated and rising up against the Imperium. But the thing is, you don't really send in a kill team of 10 or 15 Marines with a dreadnought in the underhive to wipe out a cult. You send in 3, 4, maybe 5 guys at a time. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm making 3 Space Marines that function as a single coherent unit fighting the Genestealer Cults. Kind of tunneling their way straight to the Patriarch, killing as many cultists and abominations as they can find on the way, but primarily there to just take out the Patriarch and then get out again. Let the Imperial Guard clean up the cult, follow them along in the tunnels, incinerate all the bodies, and so on and so forth. So the organization of these Space Marines is very different than you usually see. Now that's one of the first questions I asked is, are we Codex compliant or not? And overwhelmingly the response was no, we're not Codex compliant. That's for other chapters. So these guys are organized in very, very small splinter groups. All these little kill teams of 3, 4, 5 guys, they're their own independent unit. There is no home planet, there is no home base, and they're definitely not fleet based. These are Marines that are sort of attached to an Imperial Guard regiment, and they move through the universe on Imperial Navy ships with the Guard. And then whenever there's notice that there's a cult uprising, or maybe somebody smelled a Genestealer somewhere, they have to deploy super quickly, and that's why they have to spread out so far, and they can't all stay in the same place, because they just wouldn't deploy quick enough. But this means supply issues. Yeah, if you are a contained unit, that's all well and fine, but if you don't have your armory close, then you gotta live off the land, you gotta bring your own weapons, you have to have some mutations, physical mutations that could help you in combat. Just in case the power in your chainsword runs out or your armor gets damaged, you better bring your own weapons and your own armor. And we'll get to how those physical mutations show themselves. First, I'm gonna make this guy over here. This is a Breacher. He's the guy that opens the door, hack down the barricade, and sort of tunnels to wherever they need to go. This is the basic infantry Space Marine that this chapter has. He comes in Phobos armor with a Reaver body, and I'm gonna clean it up. I'm gonna remove all the little icons, we'll get to that as well. But he needs some breaching equipment, and of course, an axe is the perfect weapon. And I'm giving this sort of basic infantry Space Marine a power weapon, because my thinking is, look, if a chainsword at some point runs out of fuel or a power cell or whatever, you know, this is a chapter that's often out of supply. The chainsword is still a decent weapon in the hands of a Marine if it's unpowered, but an axe that's unpowered is still a pretty good axe and still a pretty good weapon, better than a chainsword. So it makes sense if these guys just carry power weapons. Plus, the vote was very close between great relations with Mechanicus and Imperial Guard, and if you have very good relationships with Mechanicus, you probably are very well supplied with great power weapons and so on and so forth. And big bombs. I know usually good Mechanicus relationships means big vehicles, lots of tanks, lots of armor, lots of dreadnoughts and so on and so forth. But these guys don't use tanks. You don't drive an Impulsor or Executioner into the sewers of a hive city. You use bombs to blast your way, you bring power weapons, you bring good armor and so on and so forth, but not vehicles. So this is a way of mine to express that they have that good relationship with the Mechanicus. Now, of course, they need lots and lots of grenades as well. So I'm gonna give this Breacher dude some melter bombs, some grenades, a little backup weapon in form of a dagger and whatever, some rope and some grenades attached to it, and of course a few more pouches in random places like on the legs, and maybe I can fit a few more grenades on him on his shoulder pads or so. For the head though, that's gonna be the first mutation. See, these guys, they fight in close quarters, and like I said, they have supply issues. Bringing your own weapons is a good idea. And most Space Marines, if not all, have very corrosive acid spit. So these guys, their gland that creates that corrosive acid spit is a little hyperactive. So it changes them a little bit and it gives them extremely nasty phlegm that they can hurl at their enemies. You know, they always have a weapon built in. And so his head comes from the Genestealer Cults. Yes, the very units they're supposed to be killing, that's what they're turning into. I love this theme in Warhammer, that sort of you become what you hate, you become what you're supposed to fight and kill. I think it fits the setting really well. Really nasty grimdark stuff. And still, I picked the head that is fairly human. It has a little armor patch on his forehead, showing that he is growing his own armor as well. But I think this guy is pretty much finished. And there's a few things I wanted to mention as well that tell the story too. There's no relics on this guy. This is a very new chapter, so they don't have the knuckle bone of their famous chief librarian. There is no mastercrafted power sword of their chapter master or anything like that. It's a very young chapter, so they don't have any relics. Plus, the poll said, well, nobody really wanted to have close connections with either the Inquisition or the Church. So, no relics from either side. And I think it tells a nice story. On top of that, there's no trophies, there's no skulls, there's no tyranid parts. Because these are Space Marines that are forced to fight unworthy opponents. All they do, all their life long, is crawl through the sewers, slaughtering cultists by the millions, and then occasionally a patriarch pops up, or a couple of Genestealers, and they have to actually have a pretty decent fight. But there's no trophies here, there's no battle honor markings, there's no nothing at all. These are just the janitors crawling through the sewers, cleaning out the cultists. But I'm quite happy with this guy. He's clearly a breacher dude. He has a big mine and axe, little pockets and pouches and grenades. But he only opens the door. We need somebody that is then sent through that door into a horde of cultists. And this is going to be the chapter's best warriors. You know, the chapter's best warriors depends on what your chapter is fighting. If you're fighting big monsters, you need a warrior with a big hulking weapon that can fight a tyrannophax or a hive tyrant or something like that. But for these guys, killing mostly little gribblies, they need something of a blender. Plus, you guys voted in those polls that the Marine that had the heaviest changes would be considered the best and strongest warrior of the chapter. So I'm taking a few possessed models over here and I am trying to get together a couple of claws. You know, again, if he has his own claws, he's bringing his own weapons, he doesn't have to worry that maybe halfway through the tunneling his weapon breaks or his chainsword runs out of power. He has his own weapons built in. And I know that shoulder pad looks way too chaosy, so let's straighten it out a little bit. Get rid of some of those pokey bits that are sticking out. Smoothen out this trim of the armor so it's not so wavy and wobbly, but a nice straight Imperial line. And then finally get rid of this eye that is on the shoulder pad and just smooth everything, sand it down, and then I think I can make it look a little bit more Imperial with a lot of battle damage, because that will hide what I'm doing here. There, that's pretty smooth. I can still work on it a little bit with some poster putty, or like I said, drill in a couple of holes, make it look like there's bullet holes in there. But here's the thing, this is a melee specialist and you don't send him into a swarm of mutants in Phobos armor. So instead, I'm gonna give him Gravis armor. And I know hunting tyrannids, going into space hulks and so on and so forth, fighting Genestealers, you'd expect Terminator armor. But I feel like Terminator armor is a little too special for these guys. This is a very young chapter, they are supported by the Mechanicum, so the new Gravis armor makes a little bit more sense for, you know, the close combat specialists. Yeah, that looks like a proper monster. Imagine a door blasting open and then this guy just barreling through. He is a little bit bare bones though, and I feel like this way it might look a little bit too much like he's just an infected Space Marine, which he kind of is with the mutations, but I want to see if I can make him a little bit more human. So first of all, this hand over here, that one is still kind of the right size. This one has really become a claw, but this hand could use a weapon. So let's give him a sort of holstered weapon of some kind. And I found this nice combat knife over here. I think this is an old scout sprue, I'm not 100% sure. But I like this idea of them having combat knives rather than big swords. You can't swing a massive sword when you're in a tunnel. You need to have something that is quick and easy to stab with. So a knife like this, and I think he could also carry a bunch of pouches. You know, if you're with the three of you, you all have to carry some mines and grenades and so on and so forth. So, and with that hand, he could still toss a grenade every now and then. You know, the door blasts open, he comes through, throws a few grenades, and then just plunges into the horde. Yeah, that looks good. I like him. He has a bunch of stuff like a rope and grenades here, an extra axe strapped to his backpack, the blade over there, more grenades on his chest. He looks a little bit more human and a little less like a monster right now. And I quite like him. He fits with the other guy as well. He clearly breaks open the door and then he comes blendering through. But I need a third member, and that's gonna be a navigator. Someone who can tell them exactly where the patriarch probably is or where the strongest synapse creatures are, like the lictors, or maybe he can follow the spores or something like that. And he's gonna be in this reaver armor as well. So I'm gonna give him a way to tap into the hive mind, and I'm gonna do that with this sort of little brain bug that comes from the Leviathan box set. It's basically a floating brain. So it would be cool if he can somehow connect with it and then detect where the synapse orders are coming from. Now I can't find the piece that's supposed to go here in the back of this brain blob, but that's okay. I think I can figure something out. But first of all, maybe they captured this thing, and then one thing they would do first is cut off these spikes, I think. They don't want an armored brain. They just need the brain for the synapse impulses, and that's it. So little trimming. And the same goes for these tentacles. There's no way they let this thing have its tentacles after it's been captured. But I think some kind of mechanical interfacing device would be prudent. So something that can block the hive mind from entering the marine, but allows the marine to sort of tap into the hive mind. And I can imagine an Adeptus Mechanicus Magos Biologus figuring something out, coming up with some kind of weird device that can give that one-way traffic to the Space Marine. And maybe it's even a way for the Space Marine to interfere with the synapse orders, so it can disconnect Genestealers really quickly from the hive mind just before the blender strikes. There, I think this looks pretty cool, biomechanical horror style. I think I can fit it onto his shoulder pad, something like this. But then he needs some arms first. And since this guy is navigating, I figure I give him the comms equipment and also make sure that he can stay in contact with the guard troopers that are behind them, following them, clearing out the leftover stragglers. So I'm gonna give him this sort of arm piece that all those marines that sergeants are, they navigate with, and this other arm that is pointing in the direction where the next, well, hole in the wall should be for the breacher. There. Now, I was thinking of connecting that brain directly to the brain of the Space Marine, but I think that goes a little bit too far, even for me. Having a direct connection with the hive mind is lethal in almost all cases, and I think it just goes a little bit too far. I think it's better to just say this thing is connected to that console on his arm, and when that thing comes in the range of a patriarch, starts pulsing out and starts trying to connect with that patriarch, and somehow the console can pick up on those signals and triangulate where that patriarch is. And if you get close to Genestealers, he can probably just press a button and do a massive jolt of energy into that brain, screeching out and sort of interfering with the synapse connection of the Genestealers and other mongrels that crawl the sewers that these guys are in. Now, I think he's pretty much done. I gave him the same treatment with these grenades, a little bit of daggers, pouches, and all kinds of other stuff. And it's time for a quick paint scheme. Nah, I can't do it. It's the next day and I've been looking at these guys and I think they just look a little too much like Tyranid Genestealer hybrids in power armor. There's not enough humanity in them, and I think the problem is with the heads. So I went through my bits box and I found a couple of heads that I'm gonna replace these with. I just gotta rip these heads off first. Now, the community vote for the paint scheme said red and a little bit of black as well. So the first thing I'm gonna do is paint all these pouches and little bits of equipment, the belts and so on, with a dark gray. So then at least that's gonna be black. And I can figure out what else I'm gonna paint black. Which part of the armor I want to have black. Maybe the trim, maybe the shoulder pads, maybe one of the shoulder pads. We'll see. Yeah, I think it looks good for the Phobos guys. I went over the metal parts with a darker black so that I have a little bit of tinting, shading in the black as well. But the big guy I thought was a bit too boring. So I gave him black panels on his arms, on his shoulders, just to set him apart. It makes sense. The guy in Gravis armor looks a little bit different than the guys in Phobos armor. But hey, it's time for a grime wash. I'm gonna start with some decrepit filth from Villainy Inks, nice black sort of bathroom mold effect, and it will turn everything nice and dark right away. I did a quick reduction pass to sort of highlight the top part of the armor while the bottom is still dark, and now it's time for a quick dry brush with some Iron Warriors, just to turn everything into metal, give it a little bit of battle damage, little edge highlighting, all at the same time. A bit of silver for an extra highlight, and then it's time for some skin tones, starting with a little bit of rock-art flesh, just to cover up the red, followed by a wash of Druchii Violet, because I still want a little bit of that tyranid vibe in their skin. I want a suspicious Inquisitor to be able to think, you know, what's going on here? Are these actual gene seed mutations? And that would be bad enough, of course, but, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures, so it could be allowed just for now. But maybe there's something more sinister going on here. Do the Tyranids have some corrupting influence just at a range with these Marines? Or are these guys infected? Or are they maybe consuming Tyranids just to harbor their strength and sort of figure out where they are? Try to get the memories from the brains of the Tyranids to easier and quicker find the location of their hives. Who knows? And to cast a little bit more doubt, I'm gonna give the big guy a little bit more of a white highlight, especially on his face and sort of the ends of his claws. Make him look a little bit more like a High Fleet Leviathan. I mean, if you were an Inquisitor and you saw these two guys here, and you say, well, what's going on here? And they go, oh, nothing to see here, Inquisitor. This is just the gene seed and how we mutate. It's fine. There's nothing going on here. Don't worry. How would you respond? Anyway, I'm gonna leave him for now. I think I need some kind of emblem on the shoulders. I don't know yet. Maybe some symbol for the chapter. I'm just gonna work on a little bug brain over here. First, it needs to be way brighter so I can get some nice sort of magic or synapse effects going on him. Then a bit of umbral nightshade in there, this blue enamel, that will make it very easy to have it only in the recesses because you can just remove it from the upper ridges. Then I'll use this contrast Yandan yellow to see if I can get a little bit of an orange glow coming from that mechanical bit that is jammed into this brain. See if I can make it look like it's pulsating out or somehow hurting that brain. And then a little bit of red in there, right in the center to make it look like it's hurting. And some fresh blood effects, especially here on these tentacles, but also these parts of his armor that I cut off earlier, because I imagine that's gonna hurt and bleed a little bit too, and it bleeds onto the Marine's armor. Now I need to go back to the big guy and the little guy to give them some dirt and grime and blood and gore effects as well. And I'm gonna begin with something I referred to earlier in the video, that I wanted them to have this overdeveloped gland that allows them to spit like corrosive acid. And even though they don't really have that mutation into their face anymore, I still want to give this guy something that references to that. So if he's spitting, he's probably hitting some of the rim of the armor. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of Nurgle's Rot on there, some slime kind of dripping down along the ceramite in places where he didn't spit far enough. There, he looks like he's properly throwing up now, and it's also burning his armor. It seeps into those cracks in his armor. So now the question is, were those cracks already there, or is the acid corroding his ceramite as well? Who knows? Next up, a little bit of blood effects on the hands, of course, because I want to paint my guys as if we meet them sort of mid-combat. So this is some Carrion Crimson, super nice bright red enamel paint that dries up glossy. So it's perfect for blood effects. And I'm going to mix it a little bit with some black and some blue as well to give a little bit of coagulated blood effects too. I'm going to interrupt all the blood and gore and nastiness because I really feel like the shoulder pad needs some kind of icon on there. It's just too boring, it's too bland, and even though I don't want that many markings on the armor, no honor markings, no campaign badges, nothing like that, they still need to have some kind of indicator of their chapter. And I found these sort of lightning bolts from Stormcast Eternal transfer sheet. So I'm going to use those here on the shoulder pad. Alright, a little bit of stippling, scratching and griming later, and he has nice decals on both of his shoulder pads. And the Breacher also has a lightning bolt on this shoulder pad, but of course this guy, that shoulder pad is covered with the Tyranid bug brain, so he has no decals. Saves me the work. Anyway, it's time for the base, and I want to use these bases to complete the story of the different roles that these Marines have. So, for the Breacher, there's going to be a bit of a remnant of a barricade on his base. First, I'm going to give a little bit of height difference in the base. I like it, makes the base just a little bit more interesting by just adding a little bit of cork here on the rim. And then these makeup brushes that I use to reduce my enamels, they're perfect for creating little steel or lead pipes. So they're going to be part of a little barricade that he's crashing through. And I like this stuff. This is mosquito netting, kind of nylon material. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's great to make something look kind of like a chain link fence. And I'm going to put this down right where he's going to plant his feet to make it look like he's standing on there going through it. But this squad is working in the sewers in the underhives. So a lot of texture paste goes on top of this. And then some barbed wire to finish this idea that this was an intentional barricade and not some junk that just happened to be lying on the ground where this breacher is going through. Now this guy, the dude with the bug on his shoulder, I see him more as a little bit of an officer. You know, maybe a Phobos lieutenant, but probably more likely something like a sergeant or a master sergeant, something like that. Somebody who's just elevated above the rest of the Space Marines. So I'm going to elevate him a little bit above the rest of the Space Marines on his base as well, by giving him a sort of tactical rock or a ledge in the sewer to stand on. Now a little bit of rubble on the base, some mechanical bits and pieces, and then I'm going to add this sludge sort of to the lower layer of the base, and I'm going to add a different texture paste on top of those rocks, and that's this concrete paste. It's a little thinner than the dark earth and it feels like there's less texture in there. So this is really to cover up the cork texture, because otherwise it just looks like cork. I'll add some of this sheet, this plastic sheet that looks like it's this metal pattern in there, just to give our sergeant, our officer, a nice platform to stand, kind of like his own tactical rock. Now the breacher breaches barricades, the navigator navigates from the back, and the blender blends his enemies. So I'm gonna give him a nice pile of corpses and body parts to stand on top of. Some of those heads that I used on them before, that I then ripped out. Some bodies of the acolytes and neophytes and so on and so forth. And I got this little Genestealer Cults icon that I want to incorporate in there as well. All of this gets a layer of mud and dirt at the bottom, and then I paint them. And I need a name for this custom chapter, and I was thinking, you know, it can't be anything too lofty like the Swords of the Emperor or the Angels of Doom or something like that, because these Marines, they're cursed to fight just little gribblies like nasty mutants, spawn, some Xenos hybrids. It's just bugs and insects that they're squashing all the time. So I'm thinking maybe something more that reflects their fast and rapid deployment, like raiders. And I think raiders, or the raid, is something cool for them, and then combine it with the color of their armor. So I'm thinking the Crimson Raiders is a good name for this chapter. Now I want to thank everybody who voted on all of the polls that we had. I really enjoyed this. I'm definitely going to do more. And there were lots of really cool ideas in the Discord about how to interpret these questions and the answers that come with them, and maybe make something that's the exact opposite of everything that everybody voted. Or I also saw really cool ideas about souls being separate from the Space Marine bodies and then using them as lures to get demons to come closer. I've got a bunch of ideas. I'm gonna go work on them. Thank you to my patrons and channel members. You guys rock. And maybe check out this video next.